Okay, this is lesson 2.3. This is about using the calculator, so I'm just going to have this close-up view so I can shove you the calculator in your face. Okay, so I'm going to start off by showing you where the important buttons of the calculator are that you're going to need to use for this lesson and pretty much the rest of the year. The first one you need to know is the second button. The second button brings up whatever's in blue above the letter. So if you need to get to other things, you can get to them. The three most important, of course, are the sine button right here, the cosine button right here, and the tangent button right there. They're going to be what you're going to use for sine, cosine, and tangent. Another important one comes right above apps, and it's angle. Let's see if we can put it up. Angle. Okay, that's going to help us do when we have degrees, minutes, and seconds instead of decimals. But the first button I'm going to hit is mode. Because whenever I put a calculator, whenever I want to do it, I want to check to see that I'm in degree mode. And in this calculator, I'm actually not. Right now I'm in radian mode because radian is highlighted. So I just click over, down, 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 over, put it in degree mode. If I do not put it in degree mode, all my answers will be wrong. So what kind of problems are we going to be solving here? Well, we're going to be solving problems that look like this. The cosine of negative 240. And if I asked you for an exact answer, you would have to use reference angles. So you'd have to add 360 to this, and you'd have to find the reference angle, and you'd have to look at the chart. If I ask you to use a calculator, it becomes a much easier problem. All you have to do is put it in. So we have cosine of negative 240. So that's the cosine. Hit the cosine button. Type in negative 240. Close the parentheses. Always make sure you close the parentheses. Hit enter, and the cosine of negative 40 is negative 0.5, or negative, if you want to change that to a fraction, math, this is something people don't know. Math button, the first one there is convert to fraction. So you hit math, enter, enter, and it tells you that the answer is negative 1/2. Okay, the next problem I'm going to do is also pretty easy to plug in. It's just the tangent of 675 degrees. Now again, I could do the coterminal angle thing, subtract 360, and I would get 15 degrees, I think. Don't check me on that. $315, which is, so I do the minus 315, 360 minus that. The reference angle is 45 degrees, so I could do that, or I could put it in a calculator. Tangent 675 is negative 1. So that's it. I mean, that came from the chart. If you did exactly what we did last class, you'd get negative 1. Now, the reason we can't use the calculator all the time are for problems like if I put in, for instance, the cosine of 30 degrees. Okay, if I put in the cosine of 30 degrees, that's getting me 0.866. And if I try to change that to a fraction, it's not going to work. Because if you look at your chart, the cosine of 30 is root 3 over 2. And root 3 over 2, because it has the root 3, doesn't simplify. So we do need to still use the chart. The calculator can't do everything for us. On the next clip, I'm going to show some harder problems that you would involve using the calculator. Here's the next problem we're working on. Sine of 49 degrees, 12 minutes. Two ways to do it. You could convert 49 degrees, 12 minutes by hand into decimals and then put it in the calculator, or you can understand that you can put DMS into the calculator. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Remember I told you one of the buttons that you'd be mad at me for was this angle button right here? Okay, well we want to find sine, so I type in sine. Then I hit angle. When I hit angle, that's not right because that was apps. Second apps, angle, you'll notice the first thing is degrees. So I go back out of that. I want 49 degrees, 12, back into the angle menu. Now I pick minutes. I close the parentheses. I hit enter. Oh, 0.7569. That's the answer. I didn't have to convert it. I just put it in. Next hard one that comes up is this one. Doesn't seem hard at first glance because it's 0.9799, 97.977. But the problem is that is secant, and secant is not on the calculator. So what we have to use is we have to use the reciprocal identities. We know that secant is 1 over cosine. So in order to find secant of 97.977, you have to put 1 divided by cosine. That's times, clear it out. 1 divided by cosine 97.977. And so you get the secant is negative 7.205. 2059. That's all there is to that. So when you find secant, cosecant, or cotangent, you have to do 1 divided by either sine, cosine, or tangent, depending on which one matches up with the other one. Okay, the next one, this is similar. I have 1 over the cotangent of 51. Well, I know that 1 over the cotangent is tangent, so that's really the tangent of 51.4283. So I just put it in. Tangent of 51.4283 1.2. It's as simple as that. Okay, I just look at that one. So in the next clips, I'm going to show you something called inverse trig. That's going to be real useful, both in the next lesson and in lessons after that. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is how to use what's called inverse trig. An inverse trig works the opposite way. For so far on all the trig functions of the calculator, I've given you the angle, and you have to find the sine, the cosine, the tangent, the secant, the cosecant, and the cotangent. At this point, we're going to have a situation where I tell you what the sine is, and you have to tell me what the angle would have to be. Okay, the only way to do most of these is with the calculator, unless it happens to be one of the numbers in the chart that you picked out. Okay, so the calculator is always going to give you the lowest possible value, which for most cases that we're going to be dealing with will be an acute angle, which means it would be part of a right triangle, which is going to be most of the cases we're going to be dealing with, especially the real world situations. But let me show you how to do it. Okay, so say I give you this problem. The sine of some angle is 0.9677091,705. That's a really long decimal, but I got to put the whole thing in, and you'll see why in a second. Okay, so if I know the sine of some angle is that, then what I use is the inverse sine, and the inverse sine is right above the sine. So I have to hit second sine to get inverse sine. And the decimal in this case was 0.967091705. Okay, find the inverse sine of that. After I close the parentheses, I'm going to hit enter, and it's 75.4 degrees. That's it. So if I have a sine of that number, the angle is 75.4 degrees. And you'd use the same method if it gave you the if it told you the cosine of something was cosine theta was a decimal, or if tangent theta was a decimal, and it asked you to find theta. The inverse trig is what we use when we find the angle, not when we know the angle. So the last one that I'm going to show you today, before we get to the work, is the secant is 1.0545829. Well, that doesn't help me because I don't have inverse secant, but I do have inverse cosine, which is related to secant. And I know that secant is 1 over cosine. So if I take that secant, that 1.0545829, I do 1 divided by that first. So instead of doing 1 divided by, you always do 1 divided by the cosine. So 1 divided by 1.0545829. Okay, and I find that. And then I find the inverse cosine of that number there, because 1 over the secant is the cosine. So I do second cosine. It gives me inverse cosine, and I don't want to type that whole thing in again because I already have it right there. It was my last answer. So every time you want to get your last answer back, you hit second and you hit negative. That's answer. So it gives you the previous answer. So second answer, and so the inverse cosine, that means that is an 18.5 degree angle. And that's it. So now, at this point, moving forward, you have all the tools you need. So if I give you any two sides of a right triangle, you can tell me all the sides and all the angles. We're going to actually start moving on that after the test. We have some word problems that you're going to do for the next lesson that are going to mainly use the calculator. So we're getting closer to the test. Everybody needs to make sure they're on the ball and are doing the right thing. Don't forget, your project is due October 24th, and I'll see you in class.